Outside the courthouse, Manafort attorney Kevin Downing attacked the charges, saying there is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. Asked twice by the Justice Department in November 2016 and February 2017 for any records that they had on the past Ukrainian lobbying effort, their consulting firm, DMI, responded that it does not retain communications beyond 30 days, and as a result of this policy, a search has returned no responsive documents. But the whole time, the indictment reveals, at least some of those records were stashed in Manafort's home. Those records helped Mueller put together a case accusing Manafort and Gates of serving as unregistered foreign agents by engaging over an 8-year period in a multimillion-dollar lobbying campaign that was done at the direction of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and his pro-Russian Party of Regions. Yanukovych is now living in Moscow. Jason Maloney, a spokesman for Manafort, said in an emailed statement, Mr. Manafort represented pro-European Union campaigns for the Ukrainians, and in the course of that representation he was seeking to further democracy and to help the Ukrainians come closer to the United States and to the EU. Those activities ended in 2014, 2 years before Mr. Manafort served in the Trump campaign. Today you see an indictment brought by the Office of Special Counsel that is using a very novel theory to prosecute Mr. Manafort regarding a FARA filing. The United States government has only used that offense 6 times since 1966 and only resulted in 1 conviction. The second thing about this indictment that I, myself, find most ridiculous is a claim that maintaining offshore accounts to bring all your funds into the United States, as a scheme to conceal from the United States government, is ridiculous. The Ukrainian lobbying charges are only one part of a 12-count indictment against Manafort and Gates that also accuses them of money laundering and tax evasion related to over $21 million they had socked away in offshore accounts in Cyprus, the Seychelles, and other money laundering havens. Although not directly related to allegations of collusion between the Trump campaign and Moscow, the charges, especially as they relate to the secret lobbying campaign on behalf of pro-Russian interests in Ukraine, could prove awkward for the White House on several fronts. Manafort was for a while the senior official in the Trump campaign, serving as campaign chairman and de facto manager through the Republican convention until he was fired in August 2016. Gates, Manafort's longtime business partner, was his top campaign deputy and continued to remain in Trump's orbit well after Manafort was replaced. He played a key role in planning Trump's inauguration last January, serving as a top deputy to inaugural committee chair Thomas Barrack. He was also in and out of the White House during the early days of the Trump presidency, a White House advisor who recalls seeing him there told News Pulse News on Monday. More recently, the advisor says, Gates has been working for Barrack, telling associates he was helping the private equity mogul, a close friend of Trump's, purchase portions of the entertainment empire owned by the Weinstein Company, the firm that recently fired its co-founder Harvey Weinstein over allegations of sexual assault and harassment. The Mueller indictment also could pose difficult questions for 2 major Washington lobbying firms, the Mercury Group and the Podesta Group headed by Tony Podesta, a major Hillary Clinton fundraiser and brother of Clinton campaign chairman, John Podesta. Tony Podesta resigned as head of his firm today, shortly after the Manafort indictment was announced. Both firms were hired by Manafort and Gates in 2012 to conduct the Ukrainian lobbying effort, which was nominally on behalf of a Brussels-based nonprofit called the European Center for a Modern Ukraine. Both firms said in statements last year they never registered with the Justice Department as foreign agents because they had been assured that the European Center was an independent group created by Ukrainian businessmen and was not controlled or financed by a foreign government or political party. But according to the indictment, the European Center was a front group that was under the ultimate direction of the government of Ukraine, Yanukovych, and the Party of Regions. The Washington lobbying firms were paid more than $2 million not by the center but by offshore accounts associated with Manafort and Gates in Cyprus and the Grenadines, the indictment charges. The indictment suggests that the 2 lobbying firms had been explicitly informed about the center's connection to the Yanukovych regime. Gates wrote one of the firms, identified in the indictment only as Company A, that it would be representing the government of Ukraine in Washington, D.C., the indictment states. At the direction of Manafort and Gates, both firms then engaged in extensive operations that included lobbying multiple members of Congress and their staffs about Ukraine sanctions, the validity of Ukraine elections, and the propriety of Yanukovych's imprisoning of one of his presidential rivals, Yulia Tymoshenko. After news stories first surfaced about their lobbying work on behalf of the European Centre in the summer of 2016, both firms retroactively filed with the Justice Department as foreign agents for the Ukrainian political party under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. A spokesperson for the Podesta Group said the firm is cooperating with the special counsel. The spokesperson also noted in an emailed statement that the firm had filed with Congress at the time as lobbyists for the European Centre under the Lobbying Disclosure Act, a different statute that requires far less detail than the Foreign Agents Law. Michael McKeon, a partner in Mercury, emailed a statement that said in part, Mercury worked for the ECFMU with the intention of aligning Ukraine with Western democracies generally, and the European Union specifically, on security, political and economic issues. Mercury retained legal counsel to determine the proper method of disclosure of such representation and followed the advice of such counsel. Mercury has and will continue to fully cooperate with the Office of the Special Counsel in its investigation. Mercury believed our work was intended to serve an important and proper purpose.